Case 1, September 15th, 1964. The Palm Café, 125th Street, Harlem, 3:47 p.m. Two white officers walk in like they own the place. They don't know it yet, but they just made the worst mistake of their lives. The air was thick, the kind of humidity that makes tempers short and shadows long. Inside the Palm Café, ceiling fans barely moved the scent of expensive cigars and dark coffee. This wasn't just a restaurant. This was an unofficial town hall, a place where Harlem's power brokers decided the fate of entire blocks, and at the center of it all sat Ellsworth Bumpy Johnson. By 1964, Bumpy wasn't just a man. He was an institution. He'd survived the Dutch Schultz era, outlasted the Italian mob's attempts to push him out, and built a reign that was as much about community patronage as it was about criminal enterprise. In Harlem, Bumpy Johnson was untouchable. When officers Patrick Sullivan and James Kowalski entered at 3:47 p.m., the room didn't just go quiet, it went cold. The 28th Precinct, the 2-8, was notorious. To Harlem residents, it was a colonial outpost. The officers were almost exclusively white, and their relationship with the community was defined by shakedowns and selective brutality. Sullivan and Kowalski embodied that friction. They didn't walk like men looking for a suspect. They walked like men who owned the floorboards. Sullivan's voice boomed across the room. "Ellsworth Johnson, you're under arrest for illegal gambling, narcotics distribution, and assault on a police officer." The charges were loud, public. This was a humiliation ritual designed for the witnesses. But Bumpy didn't flinch. He leaned back, took a slow sip of coffee, and looked Sullivan dead in the eye. "Which paycheck came in this week, Sullivan?" His voice was calm, surgical. "Did Vincent Gigante pay you, or was it someone from City Hall?" The room froze. That question was a tactical strike. It stripped away the officer's veneer of legal authority and exposed the gears of the machine underneath. In that moment, the Palm Café became a courtroom, and the police were the ones on trial. Real quick. Where are you watching from? Drop your city in the comments. 3:49 p.m. The door opened again and Detective Marcus Thompson walked in. In 1964, there were very few black detectives in the NYPD. The ones who existed were kept on the fringes, away from high-profile cases, denied respect by their white peers, treated like tokens instead of officers. But Marcus Thompson, he was different. He understood that the law was the only shield he had, and he knew how to use it. Thompson's eyes swept the room, taking in the scene. Sullivan red-faced and furious, Kowalski's hand hovering near his baton, Bumpy Johnson sitting calm as still water, and 40 witnesses watching it all unfold. "Let me see the warrant," Thompson said. His voice was steady, professional. Sullivan turned on him. "Stay out of this, Thompson. This doesn't concern you. You're making an arrest in my jurisdiction," Thompson replied, stepping forward. "So yeah, it does. Show me the warrant." Silence. Sullivan's jaw clenched. Kowalski shifted his weight, uncomfortable, the kind of uncomfortable that comes when you realize you don't have what you're supposed to have. "We don't need a warrant for a known criminal," Sullivan spat. Thompson didn't blink. "Actually, thought you do. That's the law. Or did they skip that part at the academy?" This was the moment. The moment a routine arrest became something else entirely. Thompson wasn't just being difficult. He was weaponizing the NYPD's own rule book. He was forcing Sullivan and Kowalski to either produce legal documentation or admit they were operating outside the law. The tension in that room was a microcosm of the entire civil rights era. On one side, the old guard, men like Sullivan who believed their badge gave them the right to bypass the Constitution. On the other, a new breed of officer who realized that if the law didn't apply to everyone, it protected no one. Thompson took another step forward, positioning himself between the officers and the door. He was physically blocking the path of corruption. "Where's the incident report?" Thompson asked. "Who's the officer that was allegedly assaulted? What's his badge number? When did it happen?" More silence. Sullivan and Kowalski weren't just angry. They were unprepared. They had expected a neighborhood to cower. They hadn't expected a colleague to cross the blue wall of silence in front of 40 witnesses. You ever seen someone risk everything for what's right? That's what this was. And it was about to get a whole lot messier. Wednesday night, September 16th, 1964, 11:15 p.m. Officer James Kowalski disappeared. His patrol car was found on 126th Street, engine still warm, driver's door open. No signs of struggle, no witnesses, no blood, nothing. Just an empty car sitting under a streetlight like a ghost. The official report said it was a missing persons case, but everyone in Harlem knew better. When what the NYPD didn't know, what they couldn't know, was that Bumpy Johnson's security team had been watching Kowalski since the moment he walked out of the Palm Café. Led by William "Bub" Hewlett, Bumpy's most trusted enforcer, they didn't use masks or guns to take him. They used something far more effective: fear. The invitation came quietly. A car pulled up beside Kowalski as he walked to his vehicle after his shift. A voice from the window, calm and polite. "Mr. Johnson would like to have a conversation with you. You can come willingly, or we can make this difficult." Kowalski looked around. 3 more cars, engines idling, blocking every exit. He wasn't stupid. He knew what this was. In the world of 1960s Harlem, when Bumpy Johnson asked to talk, the conversation was mandatory. They drove him to a warehouse in the Bronx, cold, empty. The kind of place where sound echoes and nobody hears you scream. This was crucial. By moving Kowalski outside the NYPD's immediate jurisdiction, Bumpy was sending a message. The rules of the city no longer applied. In that warehouse, Kowalski wasn't an officer of the law. He was just a man whose secrets were about to be harvested. Bumpy didn't show up right away. That was part of the strategy. Let Kowalski sit in the cold. Let him think about what was coming. Let his imagination do the work. When Bumpy finally walked in, flanked by Bub Hewlett and 2 others, Kowalski was already sweating. "You called me a nunasummer yesterday," Bumpy said, his voice low and even. "In front of my people, in my neighborhood." Kowalski opened his mouth, but nothing came out. Bumpy pulled up a chair and sat down, very close enough that Kowalski could see every line in his face. "Now, I could make you pay for that the old-fashioned way. But I'm a businessman, so here's what's going to happen. You're going to write down every dirty thing you've ever done, every bribe you've taken, every name on Vincent Gigante's payroll, every shakedown, every planted evidence, every lie." Kowalski shook his head. "I can't. They'll kill me." Bumpy leaned in closer. "And what do you think I'm going to do if you don't?" The psychological pressure was suffocating. Bumpy didn't need to break Kowalski's bones. He just needed to break his spirit by showing him that his friends at the precinct weren't coming to save him. If you're hooked already, hit that like button. Trust me, this story only gets crazier. 2 hours. That's how long Officer James Kowalski sat in that freezing Bronx warehouse, pen in hand, writing down everything, every dirty secret, every crime, every lie he'd ever told under oath. But this wasn't just about him. Bumpy didn't want one corrupt cop's confession. He wanted the entire system exposed. So Kowalski didn't just write about his own sins. He wrote about everyone else's, too. 23 names, 23 officers from the 28th Precinct who were on the Genovese crime family's payroll. Cops who took bribes from Vincent the Chin Gigante to look the other way when drugs moved through Harlem. Officers who planted evidence on innocent people. Detectives who shook down local businesses for protection money. And Kowalski didn't just give names. He gave details, bribe amounts, dates, locations, specific services rendered. But he wrote down who paid what, when they paid it, and what they got in return. This wasn't a vague accusation. This was a receipt, a paper trail that connected the NYPD directly to organized crime. Bub Hewlett stood in the corner, arms crossed, watching. Every time Kowalski's hand slowed down, every time he hesitated, Hewlett would clear his throat. That was all it took. The pen would start moving again. Bumpy sat across from him the entire time, silent. He didn't need to say anything. His presence was enough. The message was clear. You're not leaving until this is done. Kowalski's hand cramped. His fingers were stained with ink. But he kept writing, because in that moment he understood something fundamental. Bumpy Johnson didn't need violence. He needed the truth. And the truth, documented and signed, was more dangerous than any bullet. But when Kowalski finally put the pen down, his confession was 11 pages long. Bumpy picked up the papers, read through them slowly, then looked up. This better be everything, Kowalski, because if I find out you left something out, we're going to have this conversation again, and next time, it won't be this pleasant. Kowalski nodded, his face pale, his shirt soaked with sweat. Bumpy stood up, folded the papers, and slipped them into his jacket pocket. You're going to go back to your precinct. You're going to keep your mouth shut, and you're going to be the most honest cop in Harlem from now on, because if you step out of line even once, these pages go straight to the FBI. Understood? Understood, Kowalski whispered. Bumpy turned to leave, then stopped at the door. Oh, and one more thing. Tell Sullivan I want to talk to him next. The weight of what had just been written, the gravity of 23 names, dates, and dollar amounts, hung in the air like smoke. This wasn't just a confession. It was a map of institutional corruption, and Bumpy Johnson now held the key to the entire city's rot. What time is it where you are right now? Let me know in the comments. Thursday morning, September 17th, 1964, 9:43 a.m. Officer Patrick Sullivan was driving across the Triborough Bridge when he saw the flashing lights behind him. He pulled over, annoyed, probably some rookie trying to make quota. But when he looked in his rearview mirror, something felt off. The car behind him wasn't marked, and the two men who stepped out weren't wearing uniforms. They were wearing suits. Sullivan's hand moved toward his service weapon. But before he could reach it, his door was yanked open. A voice, calm and cold. Hands on the wheel, Officer Sullivan. Mr. Johnson would like a word. His blood ran cold. This was a fake checkpoint. The kind of tactic the NYPD used on criminals all the time, now being used on him. The irony wasn't lost on anyone. Sullivan tried to pull rank. Do you know who I am? I'm a decorated officer of the NYPD. You're making a huge mistake. One of the men smiled. Funny. That's exactly what Kowalski said. They drove him to the same warehouse, same cold concrete, same empty echo, and sitting in the same chair, waiting, was Bumpy Johnson. Sullivan walked in with his chest puffed out, trying to hold on to whatever authority he thought he still had. "You can't do this. When the department finds out—" Bumpy cut him off. "The NYPD is going to be more interested in covering up your corruption than rescuing you, Sullivan. Sit down." Bumpy slid a stack of papers across the table. Kowalski's confession. Sullivan's face went white as he read. His name was all over it. Dates, amounts, crimes, everything. "Your partner already sang," Bumpy said, leaning back. "Now it's your turn, and I want more than what he gave me. I want every name, every dirty cop in the 2-8, every connection to Gigante, everything." Sullivan's bravado crumbled like wet paper. His hands shook as he picked up the pen. He wrote for 3 hours. When he was done, he'd added 24 more names to the list. The total was now 47 officers, 47 cops on the Genovese family's payroll. That was nearly 40% of the entire 28th precinct. This wasn't a few bad apples, for this was institutional rot from the top down. Bumpy took the papers, read through them, and nodded. "You and Kowalski are going to keep your mouths shut. You're going to go back to work like nothing happened. And if either of you even thinks about stepping out of line, these confessions go public. The FBI, the newspapers, everyone gets a copy." Sullivan nodded, defeated. Bumpy stood up and walked to the door, then paused. "Oh, and Sullivan, next time you call me a number, make sure you're ready for what comes after. 47 cops. Let that sink in. Nearly half the precinct was dirty. Friday, September 18th, 1964, 2:15 p.m. Bumpy Johnson walked into the 28th precinct with a leather briefcase in his hand. Let me say that again, because you need to understand the audacity of this moment. The man they tried to arrest 3 days ago just walked through the front door of the police station that wanted him behind bars. No handcuffs, no escort, just Bumpy, his briefcase, and the kind of confidence that comes from holding all the cards. The desk sergeant looked up, confused. "Can I help you?" "I'm here to see Captain Morrison," Bumpy said calmly. "Tell him Ellsworth Johnson is here. He'll want to take this meeting." 5 minutes later, Bumpy was sitting in Morrison's office. Captain Robert Morrison and Lieutenant Frank Chen sat across from him, their faces tight with confusion and barely concealed anger. "You've got a lot of nerve showing up here, Johnson," Morrison said. Bumpy didn't respond. He just opened the briefcase and slid 2 thick stacks of paper across the desk. Morrison picked them up, started reading. His face went from red to pale in about 30 seconds. Sullivan's confession, Kowalski's confession, 47 names, dates, bribe amounts, connections to Vincent Gigante, services rendered, crimes committed under the color of law. Lieutenant Chen leaned over to read, and his jaw went slack. This wasn't just evidence of corruption. This was a blueprint of how the Genovese crime family had purchased an entire police precinct. It was the kind of documentation that could bring down careers, pensions, and send people to federal prison for decades. Morrison looked up, his hands trembling slightly. "Where did you get this?" Bumpy smiled. "That your boys were very cooperative once we had a chance to talk." "This is extortion," Chen said, his voice shaking. "No," Bumpy corrected. "This is insurance. See, I could take these confessions to the FBI right now. I could walk them over to the New York Times. I could make sure every dirty cop in this precinct spends the next 20 years in a cell. But I'm not going to do that." Morrison's eyes narrowed. "What do you want?" Bumpy leaned forward. "I want peace. I want your officers to stop harassing my people. I want the shakedowns to end. I want the planted evidence, the false arrests, the beatings, all of it, to stop. You leave Harlem alone, and these papers stay in my safe." "And if we refuse?" Chen asked. Bumpy's smile disappeared. "Then I publish everything. And when the feds come knocking, they won't just be coming for your officers. And they'll be coming for you too. Because either you knew about this and did nothing, or you were too incompetent to see it. Either way, your careers are over." Morrison and Chen exchanged a look. They were trapped, and they knew it. "This is blackmail," Morrison said quietly. "Call it what you want," Bumpy replied. "But here's the reality. If I release these confessions, the federal crackdown won't just hit you. It'll hit everyone, including me. So I'm offering you a deal. Peace or war. Your choice." The room was silent except for the hum of the fluorescent lights overhead. Bumpy stood up, closed his briefcase, and walked toward the door. "You've got until Monday to decide. But I think we both know what the smart choice is." He paused at the door and looked back. "Oh, and Captain, Sullivan and Kowalski are going to need some time off. Paid leave. Call it stress. They've been through a lot this week." And then he walked out of the precinct, into the Harlem sunlight, untouched. Yo, if you're not subscribed yet, what are you waiting for? Hit that button. We've got more stories like this coming. Captain Robert Morrison sat in his office for 20 minutes after Bumpy left, staring at the confessions spread across his desk. 47 names. 47 officers whose careers, whose lives, were now in the hands of a man they'd tried to arrest just days ago. Lieutenant Chen broke the silence. "We can't let him get away with this." Morrison looked up, his face hollow. "Get away with what? Exposing the truth? He's got signed confessions, Frank. Dates, amounts, names. If this goes public, we're done. Not just the officers on that list. Us too." Chen's jaw tightened. So what? We just roll over?" "No," Morrison said slowly. "We survive." He understood what Bumpy had done. This wasn't just blackmail. It was strategy. Bumpy Johnson couldn't destroy the NYPD without destroying the entire ecosystem he operated in. If those confessions went to the FBI, the federal crackdown would sweep up everyone. The Genovese family, the corrupt cops, the politicians on the take, and Bumpy himself. But if he held on to them, if he kept them locked away as leverage, then he had something more valuable than money or muscle. He had a dead man's switch, a guarantee that as long as those papers existed, nobody could touch him. Morrison picked up the phone and made the call. By Monday morning, the deal was done. Sullivan and Kowalski were placed on 30-day paid suspension, officially for stress and mental health concerns. The harassment in Harlem slowed to a crawl. The shakedowns stopped. The false arrests dried up, not because the officers suddenly grew a conscience, but because Captain Morrison made it clear anyone who stepped out of line, anyone who gave Bumpy Johnson a reason to open that safe, would be thrown to the wolves. The precinct didn't reform out of morality. It reformed out of fear. And Bumpy Johnson? He walked out of that building holding the most powerful weapon in New York City, the truth, signed and documented, ready to detonate at any moment. Saturday morning, September 19th, 1964. Officers Patrick Sullivan and James Kowalski were released from their paid administrative leave and returned to duty at the 28th Precinct. The official story. They'd been under investigation for procedural violations during the attempted arrest of Ellsworth Johnson. After a thorough review, they were cleared of wrongdoing and given a 30-day suspension as a precautionary measure. It was a lie. Everyone knew it was a lie. But it was the lie that kept the machine running. What happened next was almost funny, if it wasn't so dark. Sullivan and Kowalski became the most honest cops in Harlem, not because they'd found religion, not because they suddenly cared about justice, but because they knew Bumpy Johnson was watching every move, every arrest, every interaction. Detective Marcus Thompson noticed it first. He'd watched Sullivan walk past opportunities he would have jumped on a week ago. A dice game in an alley, a street vendor without a permit, a kid with a joint in his pocket. T. Sullivan would just keep walking, eyes forward, like he didn't see a thing. Kowalski was the same, quiet, careful, almost paranoid. Thompson pulled Sullivan aside one day. "You feeling all right? You've been different." Sullivan looked at him, his face pale. "I'm just doing my job, Thompson. By the book, that's all." Behind the scenes, Captain Morrison was doing damage control, quiet internal investigations, forced retirements, transfers to precincts in Staten Island and Queens. He couldn't fire 47 officers without raising red flags, but he could slowly prune the rot before it reached the trunk. It was shadow reform, a secret cleansing that the public never saw but that changed the daily reality of life in Harlem. The harassment stopped, not because hearts changed, but because the machine had been exposed. If Vincent Gigante realized his tools at the 28th Precinct had become liabilities, the payroll dried up, the protection evaporated, and the people of Harlem, they noticed fewer beatings, fewer shakedowns, fewer young men disappearing into the system on trumped-up charges. Bumpy Johnson had done what the police commissioner, the mayor, and the civil rights leaders couldn't. He'd cleaned up the 28th Precinct through the sheer force of blackmail. What's the weather like where you're at? Sunny? Raining? Drop it below. From September 1964 until July 7th, 1968, Bumpy Johnson walked the streets of Harlem as an untouchable man. He had achieved the impossible, a state of coexistence with a police department that loathed him. The 28th Precinct couldn't arrest him without risking exposure. The Genovese family couldn't move against him without their entire NYPD operation collapsing. And the FBI. They had no idea the leverage even existed. The confessions remained locked in a safe. Silent. Waiting. Bumpy never had to use them again. Their existence was enough. It was the ultimate insurance policy. A dead man's switch, thought that guaranteed his safety for years. He continued running his operations, the numbers racket, the protection services, the community programs that kept Harlem fed and protected. But now, he did it without the constant threat of police raids and false arrests. For 4 years, there was peace. Then, on July 7th, 1968, Bumpy Johnson collapsed at Wells Restaurant on 7th Avenue. Massive heart attack. He was dead before the ambulance arrived. He was 62 years old. And with his death came the final mystery. What happened to the confessions? According to those close to the family, the documents were burned within 48 hours. The greatest piece of evidence in New York City history, 47 signed confessions linking the NYPD to organized crime, turned to ash. Why? Because Bumpy Johnson wasn't a reformer. He was a survivor. He used the truth to protect his life, and once his life was over, the truth became a danger to his family, a danger to his community, a danger that could reignite the war he'd spent 4 years keeping at bay. By burning those papers, his family ensured that the peace wouldn't shatter over his grave. The leverage died with him, and the secrets, they stayed buried. So why does this story still hit so hard in 2026? Because it's a David versus Nas Goliath story, where David is a crime boss, And the slingshot is a signed confession. It flips everything we think we know about good guys and bad guys. In September 1964, the good guy was a detective who risked his career for a warrant. The hero was a criminal who used the system's own corruption to force it to be fair. It's messy, it's complicated, and that's exactly why it matters. This story challenges us. It asks, what do you do when the people sworn to protect you are the ones hurting you? What do you do when the law is a weapon instead of a shield? Bumpy Johnson's answer was simple. Document everything. He understood something that we're still learning today in the age of body cameras and cell phone videos. The most powerful weapon against the abuse of authority is the record of the truth. Not violence, not revenge. To documentation, 47 signed confessions, dates, names, dollar amounts. That paper trail was more dangerous than any gun Bumpy ever carried. And here's the thing. He didn't use it to destroy the system. He used it to make the system work. He forced corrupt cops to be honest. He made a police department that terrorized Harlem actually serve and protect it, even if it was only out of fear. That's power. September 15th, 1964. A week that proved authority isn't absolute. It's a contract. And when the NYPD broke that contract by fabricating charges, taking bribes, and brutalizing a community, Bumpy Johnson made them pay. Not with bullets, with truth. He didn't just survive the system. He exposed it. He bent it. And for 4 years, he made it bow. That's why this story went viral. That's why it matters. And because it reminds us that even in the darkest times, even when the people in power are corrupt, the truth, documented, signed, and undeniable, can level the playing field. Bumpy Johnson walked into a police station that wanted him dead and walked out holding their fate in a briefcase. If this story blew your mind, smash that like button, drop a comment, and subscribe. We've got more untold history coming your way. And one last question. What do you think? Was Bumpy a hero or a villain? Let me know in the comments.